Welcome to the Buckeye Battle Cry Show. I am your host, Brandon Hill. I'm a diehard sports fan and especially the Ohio State Buckeyes football. Welcome to today's show. Today's topics are going to cover Week 7 highlights, the Buckeyes versus Illinois recap, the top 5 games of last week, my top 10, this week's Legends in Scarlet and Gray, and preview of Week 7's top 6 games this week, along with the Ohio State game. And I'll conclude the show with my Instagram topic of the week. So let's start the show off with my Week 7 highlights. And I'll start with the 5 games that I selected last week as my top 5 games and who I picked to win these games. I just want to point out up front that before we get into this, I went 4-1. Last week I went 4-1. The week before that I went 6-0. So another great week of picks. I'm sure a lot of you watching this probably watch Joel Klatt and watch his quote unquote expert picks and opinions. And I was watching Klatt last week and watching him pick games, and I watched him pick Mizzou over Alabama and Oklahoma over Texas and Scum over USC. And I just watched his process, and he just cares way too much about stats. Way too much. He doesn't consider the stats and the teams that the other teams have played to acquire those stats. I feel like he's, in a way, kind of a fraud. Like, he doesn't actually watch these teams play, because if you watched these teams play, you would know that even though statistically, right, say like a few weeks ago, Ohio State statistically isn't nearly as good on offense as Washington. But were you going to pick Washington to beat Ohio State? No, I'm sure a few people did, a few crazy people, but you know Ohio State's defense is going to shut down Washington's offense, and then their offense is going to do enough to win that game. And this week is no different. Missouri, they have a great running game statistically because they didn't play anybody. They haven't played anybody. Their quote-unquote toughest competition prior to Alabama was South Carolina, and South Carolina has 4 losses. You have to consider all these factors when you're picking games. And let me just say, Klatt is not good at it. He's not good at it. And he's a former athlete, and he's the guy on Fox, getting to call these games. And we'll get into that a little bit here soon about how ridiculous he sounds sometimes in these games. And don't get me wrong, I like Klatt. It sounds like I'm here crapping on Klatt because I think he's bad or anything. No, it's like Dave Portnoy or Paul Feinbaum. I know that's not his name. Those people do not belong on TV. No, those people are a joke. Okay. Klatt is very good at what he does, as in he sounds professional. He has the athletic background. He's just not very good at picking football games. He just doesn't know how to do it. So another week, I kicked his ass picking games. And let's start with the first game. The game we care about most as Ohio State Buckeye fans, assuming you're an Ohio State fan watching this show. And that's Ohio State at Illinois. Ohio State gets out of there with a 34-16 win. After, they had a 34-10 lead. They let Illinois get a junk touchdown on the board towards the end of the game, which hurts statistically, but at the end of the day, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Now let's get to the stats. Ohio State had 272 yards of total offense to Illinois' 295. Ohio State had 0 turnovers and Illinois had 3. And frankly, that's a huge reason the game was so out of hand for Illinois, because they moved the ball. Ohio State got the ball in scoring position multiple times, which means they didn't have to go far down the field to get touchdowns and or field goals. So let's just talk about how well the Buckeyes take care of the ball and turnovers. They are doing a really great job at not turning over the football so far this season. And any team can beat you even when they don't have the number of total yards or all the statistics when they get the ball in scoring position off of turnovers. So Ohio State's been doing a really good job of that. It was a very safe game played by Ohio State. Ohio State had 106 rushing yards at 3 yards per rush. Doesn't wow you, doesn't knock you over as, oh, great job running the ball, but the Illini only had 47 yards rushing at 1.7 yards per rush. And that, that's just bad. That's not going to get it done in football games. Obviously, shutting down the rushing game gives the defense to put Illinois in obvious passing downs, and obvious passing downs are great situations for forcing turnovers, which you see that's what they did. They were in pass defense. Yeah, they got interceptions. They were in pass defense. They had a nice blitz off the corner that knocked the ball out of Altmaier's hand for a fumble recovery. So that's what shutting down the run does for a defense, and that's why it's so important. The defense did not pressure Altmaier consistently in that game, and that could be a problem later on down the road. They were shutting down the Illini offense and went up 20-0, but then they went into like a pre-style type of defense, which allowed Illinois to work the ball down the field slowly, methodically. Eventually, that's how Illinois got their first 3 points on the board. And I'll be honest with you, I don't get it. I get that you don't want to allow the other team to beat you over the top with a big play, quick strike, easy touchdown. But at the same time, why go into conservative mode? It's frustrating to watch for me. They were dominating Illinois when they were playing aggressive, shut Illinois down defense. And then when they went into a more conservative defense where they were off the wide receiver, didn't blitz, just a 3 to 4 man rush, it just gives Illinois a chance to feel like they can move the ball and they can get back into the game. That has just a gross feeling to me as a fan to watch Ohio State do that when they get conservative after they get the lead like that. Anyway, let's talk about the offense. This wasn't a wow me game. They were productive and they moved the ball, but they were settling for field goal attempts early in the game. 2 out of 3 times they were in scoring position, they had to settle for field goal attempts, and they went up 13-0 versus 21-0, which is a huge difference in a football game. You're talking about taking 3 scores to just break even versus 2 touchdowns for Illinois, and they're back in the lead. So the ability to not punch it in when they're in scoring position early in the game was something they definitely have to improve on. That's not a great way to win football games and be comfortable in football games. Eventually they did score another touchdown and go up 20-0. And then they came out in the second half and they scored 7 points in each quarter, but it just wasn't a great offensive performance. 3 turnovers by the defense put them in scoring position, which made their life a little easier. Sayin had his, quote unquote worst game yet in completion percentage at only 70%, which still isn't bad. He went 19 of 27. The longest play Ohio State had either passing or running was 22 yards, and that was a 22-yard pass to Max Clare. The explosives just weren't there in this game, and there's definitely room for improvement offensively. Some other noticeable things about the game were just bad officiating and awful announcing. Again, like I said earlier, I actually like Klatt. I do. But he gets on the road and in a stadium and he gets kind of a homer mentality. He hangs around that team all week and he starts to like them and whatever the case is. And you could see early in the game, he was really pushing for Illinois. I don't know if it was just to compete or he actually wanted them to win, or I don't know what it was, but he was calling for pass interferences on Ohio State, which frankly looked like toss-up plays to me. Sometimes it looked like, yeah, okay, maybe you could call pass interference there. A lot of hand holding, a lot of hand fighting, but also sometimes it just looked like solid defense. And, they're crying for pass interference when it just wasn't there. It just didn't need to be there. And conversely, the play where Jeremiah Smith had a controversial catch that turned into a drop, and they replayed it about 20 times because they were just trying to make sure he had a catch going through the completion to the ground. And just like I said in the Texas game where they gave Texas a touchdown, it was the exact same scenario. The receiver caught the ball going to the ground. When he hit the ground, the ball moved, it popped out. They gave Texas a touchdown, which they didn't deserve. And they took the catch away from Jeremiah Smith. By the letter of the law, yes, that is the right call because he did not catch it all the way through to the ground. And I have no problem with that incompletion. But what I have a problem with is they replayed that play like 20 times. I know I'm exaggerating, but they kept replaying it over and over and over again. And what I kept seeing was the Illini defender's arm coming in and smacking Jeremiah Smith's arms and hands before the ball even arrived. And not one time did I hear Klatt talk about how that should be pass interference on the Illini, because it 100% was a missed pass interference call. And nobody called it, nobody talked about it, and it's super frustrating not only to see refs be inconsistent in their game calling from week to week, but also just watch these. Klatt's not the only one that's guilty of it, but these announcers, they go to the town of the game that's playing and they get that home field advantage with the announcers, and they just become homers and they overlook things that the hometown is doing, and they start looking for things to defend the hometown, and it's just old and it's annoying. And Klatt is definitely guilty of this. You definitely felt like he was rooting for Illinois, if not to win this game, at least hang tough in this game. And that gets annoying. And also, I just guess we're at the point in college football where we just accept mediocrity in officiating. I mean, it is painful to watch at times. So to finish my thoughts on the Buckeyes overall, play calling matters a lot for this team. They're only as great and as dominant as the coaching allows them to be. And both the offense and the defense were at times certainly handcuffed by the plays being called. And I just wanted to add this. We should enjoy this season, right? As a Buckeye fan, just enjoy this season. It is so different than last season. Last season was full of expectations. It was a high pressure season because Ohio State clearly had the best team in the country, and they had to live up to those national championship expectations, and they had that pressure on them. And yeah, they lost 2 games during the season. At the end of the day, they won the national championship and made an amazing playoff run, but definitely not without its bumps and bruises and a lot of pressure along the way. Now, this season, we have a young team that I did not expect to be as good as they are, period. I know Ohio State reloads. I've been an Ohio State fan my whole life. I know Ohio State reloads. Ryan Day, while he has an amazing winning percentage, he still struggles and or loses historically games he shouldn't lose, aka scum, 4 losses in a row. So my hopes weren't high for this season. I expected the Buckeyes to finish 3rd in the Big Ten. But now we definitely have a shot at not only going undefeated in the regular season, but winning the Big Ten championship and potentially being a number 1 seed in the playoffs. And if they stumble along the way and lose an unexpected game or lose in the playoffs and don't win the national championship, even if they get the number 1 seed, yes, it will be disappointing. But also, they deserve kudos for having a great season with this very young new team. So just enjoy it and have fun this season. And I haven't been the biggest Ryan Day fan or supporter. Last year, it was even harder for me to support him with 2 losses with clearly the best team in the country. But I have to give them credit. They made the playoff run. And I feel like this season, he's in some ways learned how to be more consistent as a coach, learn how to expect more, and learn how to make the team show up every week fired up, understanding no matter what anyone says, this team has work to do. They're not just going to show up on Saturday and beat other teams. They have work to do. And so I think this is his best coaching job so far this year. Certainly have not been nearly as upset with Ryan Day as I have been historically at this time this season. Yeah, sometimes the play calling offensively gets a little conservative, and that does bother me quite a bit, frankly. When you have a Ferrari and you don't open it up and drive it full speed, you have it at idle, just barely humming sometimes. He's growing as a coach, and let's just enjoy this season. Let's see how it turns out. Right now, Ohio State looks like the best team in the country, certainly defensively. Offensively, they have a lot of room to improve. But if for some reason it doesn't go our way, just enjoy the season. Have fun. All right, on to the next games. The next game was Alabama at Missouri. I obviously picked Alabama to beat Missouri. I went 4-1. The only loss that I took was Indiana beating Oregon. So let's just get that out of the way. I took Alabama to beat Missouri. Alabama wins 27-24. Klatt got enamored by Missouri's statistics, and he took Missouri to beat Alabama. But why? When's the last time Missouri beats Alabama? It's like, I don't know, pick a team from the Big Ten, throw out statistics. Ohio State just has that fear and domination over multiple Big Ten teams. And this is what Alabama has over Missouri. Missouri doesn't mentally believe they can beat Alabama. They have to try to convince themselves that they have what it takes, and they still need to get over the hump to do that. And this game is just further proof. I mean, Bama had 325 yards total offense to Missouri's 330. Really, no difference, right? 5 yards difference, big deal. Missouri had 167 yards passing. Bama had 200 yards. Not a huge difference. Alabama, 125 yards rushing. Missouri, 163 yards rushing. Edge Missouri, not a huge difference. So that you see a 27-24 game, and if you didn't see how it ended, it genuinely came down to Missouri's losing by 3. They have the ball in their hands. They have a chance to go down the field and drive and kick a field goal to tie or potentially score a touchdown to win. And what happens? Alabama intercepts the ball and secures the victory. So again, turnovers, killer. Missouri had 2 to Alabama's 1, and that last one cost them the game. So it was a nice win for Bama, and on to the next one, because it's not going to get any easier from there. Next game, Oklahoma at Texas. If you watched last week's show, you know that I picked Texas. You know why I picked Texas. I'm not going to get into that, but Texas very much needed a win here, and they needed it to keep their season alive, because a 3-loss Texas team is done for any kind of hopes in any postseason. So let's get into the numbers. Texas had 302 total yards to Oklahoma's 258. Again, the killers that I will repeat to death are turnovers. And Oklahoma, specifically Mateer, had 3 interceptions. Mateer threw 3 interceptions. And Texas and Manning just didn't turn the ball over. In this game, an X factor was special teams. Texas had a punt return for a touchdown. Now, there was a block in the back by Texas committed, and should that touchdown have been returned? Absolutely. But it's just par for the course with horrible officiating in college football. There are just times in college football where the officials just don't get it right. And this is just another example, a clear block in the back that was missed. And I have no dog in this fight. Don't get me wrong. I only care about the officiating, and I want it to be accurate and correct. And the fact that Texas scores a touchdown on this punt return only helps me, who picked Texas to win this game, and Texas fans. But otherwise, I don't really care that it happened as far as I was rooting for Oklahoma or Texas or anything like that. It's a play that happened. It's a call that needs to be made. Texas played very good run defense, and Oklahoma only averaged 1.6 yards per carry. And I just went into why that's important for obvious passing downs and pass defense, which led to Mateer's 3 interceptions. And Texas averaged 3.9 yards per carry, so almost 4 yards a carry. And as I stated before, a much needed win by Texas. We'll see if Texas can contend going forward. They do have to win every game from this point out to have a chance. I don't see a 3-loss Texas team getting into the playoffs. On to the next game, the only one I did not get correct last week. But again, if you watched last week's show, you saw that I said Indiana absolutely has the team to go into Oregon and beat Oregon. And there was a part of me that wanted to pick Indiana, but I had to go with 2 things. One, the proven team, Oregon. Oregon's been in big game atmospheres for a long time, and they know how to win in those atmospheres. And number 2, the game is at Oregon, and that is not an easy place to get a win. As a matter of fact, going into this game, because Georgia and Washington had both gotten it beaten at home earlier this season. Oregon had the current winning streak home record with the most wins at home without a loss in a row because Washington and Georgia lost. Now Oregon lost, so now they don't have that anymore. And I currently don't know who has the most wins at home streak going on right now. I can tell you it's not Ohio State. I know that for sure, but we'll find that out coming up in the future. So Indiana went into Oregon, pulled off a huge win. In some people's eyes, an upset. In my eyes, I knew it was a toss-up game, so I don't really consider it an upset. But total yards, Indiana had 326 and Oregon only had 267. Passing yards, Mendoza threw for 215 and Oregon's Moore only threw for 186. Rushing, Indiana had 111 yards to Oregon's 81. It was a very competitive back-and-forth game that came down to late in the fourth quarter. Oregon had a chance after being down 27-20 to drive to tie the game, and then what happens? A late interception thrown by Moore essentially costs Oregon the game. So really the difference in this game, turnovers. Oregon's 2 to Indiana's 1. The stats are very close. The teams were very close, and the turnovers were the difference in the game that allowed Indiana to take this one. It's an incredibly huge win by Indiana. It solidifies them as a legitimate program and legitimate contender in the Big Ten and in the college football playoff picture. If the remainder of the season goes as planned, we could be looking at an undefeated Ohio State versus an undefeated Indiana in the Big Ten championship for the number 1 seed in the college football playoffs. Still a long way to go, but keep that in mind. I mean, imagine Indiana, a number 1 seed in the college football playoffs. Not a number 1, the number 1 seed, because there's only one in football. We're not talking basketball here. So that would be definitely, I don't think anything anyone would have predicted going into this season, but they have to get through Ohio State to make that happen as well. And then the 5th and final game that I'm going to preview that I picked last week, I did pick USC to beat Scum. They beat them 31-13, and it wasn't even really a close game. Score-wise, it was close for a little while because USC turned the ball over a couple times in scoring position, and that allowed Scum to stay in the game. I knew Scum didn't really have a chance. Their defense is not great. USC's been moving the ball well on every opponent they played, including Illinois, even though they lost that game. And frankly, Scum never did deserve to be in the top 25. And the only reason they were there is that logo on their helmet. I mean, that ugly ass yellow design that has to be one of the dumbest and ugliest helmets in all of football. And some would be like, oh, but Scum has a great defense. No, they don't. USC had 489 yards of total offense. 489. And Scum had 316. Now, USC passed the ball for 265 and ran the ball for 224. So what did Scum stop? The passing game? No. Did they stop the running game? No. So they just didn't stop anything because they're a fraud. And Scum, who lives and dies by the running game, they had 109 yards rushing. Now, granted, I know their best running back got hurt, and I know that hurt Scum as far as their ability to get more rushing yards and move the ball a little bit. But again, they wouldn't have won the game. USC is not a great defense, and they still held Scum to 109 rushing yards. To put that in perspective, they gave up 171 rushing yards to Illinois and 331 passing yards to Illinois. So USC, not a great defense, shut Scum down, and they got ran over. So again, as I stated before, Scum frauds, don't belong in the top 25, won't be in the top 25 after this week. And if you take away the run, they can't win. Their defense is not great. It's average at best, and they don't belong in any conversation for any elite team in college football, because they're not. All right, other notable games worth discussing because they do affect the big picture. So Pitt beat FSU 34-31, and this diminishes Miami's wins, especially obviously against FSU last week. So anyone who was arguing that maybe Miami deserved to be number one, again, I ask you why? Because you thought Florida State was someone they're not because they beat Alabama week 1. Well, guess what? Now they're a 3-loss Florida State team. And if you look at the total records of teams that Miami beat, Florida State, Florida, Notre Dame, they're not good. Overall, they're not good. And they're not even close to what Ohio State has faced versus wins and losses of records of the teams that they've played. So Pitt beating FSU knocks FSU out of any dreams of being in a playoff and hurts Miami for sure. Ole Miss escapes Washington State. This is important because Ole Miss was at home, and they barely beat Washington State at home by 3 points. 3 points. And the AP has Ole Miss, I think, at number 4 last week. They have them at number 5 now. But again, is Ole Miss a fraud just squeaking by 24-21 versus Washington State at home? This is definitely an eye-opener for sure. And not the first time Ole Miss this season has barely scraped by a team they should easily handle and dominate. Iowa State loses to Colorado 2 weeks in a row. Iowa State with losses to teams that start with a C, Cincinnati and Colorado. And those are 2 Big 12 losses. So Iowa State, who looked like they were firmly in control of colliding with Texas Tech for the Big 12 championship, is in trouble at this point. And I know other outlets have said this. I've said it before. Texas Tech is the clear favorite in the Big 12. And not only the Big 12, they are going to contend on the national level. When they get into the playoffs, depending on opponents, I do expect Texas Tech to do pretty well in the playoffs. Another game that matters, especially to Big 10 fans, is Nebraska beats Maryland. Now, you said, why does this matter? Why? Because they were both one-loss teams. They were both one-loss overall and both one-loss Big 10 teams. And if you didn't see this game, it's another heartbreaking loss for Maryland. They lost again at the end of the game after they had the lead, and then they had the ball with a chance to drive down the field and tie the game and or take the lead. And they get stopped on 4th down, and they just can't do that. They just can't score 2 weeks in a row. Maryland loses at the end of a game. And more importantly, for Nebraska, that takes them to 5-1 and a team to watch in the Big 10. For probably one of the most shocking things of all, at least to me, with Big 10 history, maybe to some of you other Big 10 fans, is Penn State loses their 3rd game in a row, and they lose not only to Northwestern, but they lose at home to Northwestern, which is absolutely wild to lose to Northwestern and at home. It's been a long time, maybe never, since I've seen a team with such high expectations and one of the favorites to win a national championship going into the season to have this kind of collapse. Now, I know James Franklin has an insane contract that keeps him financially locked up with Penn State, but if you're a Penn State booster and fan, you want this guy gone. He's a proven loser in big games, and now he can't beat teams he is supposed to even beat. He clearly has lost the locker room and confidence of his players, and maybe some of you don't understand how stacked this team is with future NFL players, but trust me, people will be looking back at this team and asking, how are they so bad? Now, as I'm writing this, breaking news, James Franklin gets fired from Penn State. He has been fired, so it's official. He is done at Penn State. In my opinion, it's been a long time coming. It felt like this was a make or break season for him, and it ends up as a break. It will be interesting to see who Penn State picks to take his job. It is a coveted coaching job. Penn State is a football school with the largest stadium capacity-wise in college football. And I would be surprised if that decision is made quickly. I expect that Penn State will take their time with this one and just use an interim to play out the season. So be interesting to see what happens there at Penn State. One of the other games I wanted to mention is Georgia squeaks by Auburn 20-10. Now, I ask you, is Georgia the luckiest team in college football, or is there just a payoff between the referees and Georgia's boosters? There was a huge goal line play, if you didn't see this game, and the refs awarded a fumble to Georgia, and that completely changed the entirety of the game if the refs don't make that call. Now, the quarterback for Auburn, they were on the 1 yard line, probably half yard line. He went to go over top of the offensive line and sneak into the end zone, and he has the ball in his hand, and as he's crossing the plane, it's very close. The ball gets punched out by a Georgia player. That's the way it was called on the field, as a fumble, and they didn't overturn it with replay. But I promise you this, there's no way in hell the ref saw that in live action to make that call on the field. You could barely tell in slow motion replay if that ball crossed the line and got knocked out, or if it got knocked out before it crossed the line. And you're trying to tell me that the refs saw that live on the field? There's no way that happened. So that call completely changed the complexion of the entire game. Instead of Auburn going up 17-0 and into halftime with probably a 17-0 lead, Georgia gets the ball back. Auburn looks completely defeated. Georgia drives down the field. They get a field goal, and they go into halftime 10-3, and they end up losing the game 20-10. Auburn does, and Georgia ends up winning 20-10. That call was everything in this game, and Georgia, I don't know. I raise my eyebrows at refereeing and officiating in Georgia games, because we all know the hit on Marvin Harrison, that was clearly a targeting call that not only wasn't called targeting in the game, was reversed, or maybe it was called targeting in the game, but either way, it was reversed after a replay, and Georgia just gets away with murder. They got to be the luckiest team in college football. So, because we are Big Ten Ohio State lovers, here are the current standings in the Big Ten. And Indiana's 3-0, Ohio State's 3-0. They're both tied for first place in the Big Ten. USC's 3-1, Iowa 2-1, Scum 2-1, Minnesota 2-1, Nebraska 2-1, Northwestern 2-1, Oregon 2-1, UCLA 2-1, Washington 2-1. Of note, Penn State 0-3, Michigan State 0-3, Purdue 0-3, Rutgers 0-3, Wisconsin 0-3. So maybe some surprises in there who are still vying for upper positioning in the Big Ten. Of course, UCLA, probably the biggest surprise of them all. Not from preseason, but just based off how they started their season. And they've had two very impressive wins in a row. I had Michigan State and Purdue at the bottom of the Big Ten going into the season, so no surprise to me They're both 0-3 in the Big Ten. While they are improved teams, Big Ten as a conference are improved overall. So we'll see how it plays out. Like I said before, it looks like Indiana and Ohio State are on the path to a collision course for the Big Ten championship game. Let's see if that's how it goes. And now it's time for my top 10. So first, we'll go over the AP top 25. So you can see the graphic here. And just like every week, some teams just don't belong in this poll. Like I said before, Scum didn't belong there. They were basically there because of the logo on their helmet and their history, but they had done nothing to prove that they belonged in the top 25. And now, after losing to USC, who frankly should had already been a top 25 team, they got knocked out. Some teams deserve to be moved based off wins and losses and quality of opponent. I mean, this is designed to be a weekly list, right? You're supposed to shift this list based off who teams play and who they beat and who they lose to. Some of the ones that stand out to me that do not belong are Notre Dame. Not that they don't belong in the top 25. You want to make an argument that since starting off 0-2 and they've won 3 games since then, you want to squeeze them back into the top 25, fine, do it. But number 13, seriously? So you have 2-loss Notre Dame over 1-loss Oklahoma, undefeated BYU, 1-loss Mizzou, 1-loss Vandy. The list goes on. 1-loss USC, 1-loss Utah, 1-loss Nebraska. They just don't belong at number 13. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And the same for LSU at number 10. How is LSU a top 10 team? How? Their quality wins are not even top 25 opponents. So how are they number 10? I don't get it. I don't understand it. Ridiculous. And USC, to me, deserves to be in the top 10. Why? Because right now they look like the 4th best team in the best conference in the country. So you're telling me that because you didn't have them in the top 25 previously, which they should have been, they deserved to be, now you can only put them in at number 20 after they absolutely rout Scum? The AP's a joke. It always has been a joke. And finally, Texas being number 21 is absurd. You didn't even have them in there when they were 2-2. And now that they're, or whatever they are, I honestly don't know their record, but they had 2 losses. They finally beat Oklahoma. Okay, just like Notre Dame, you want to squeeze them back in, fine, do it. But they don't jump over a 1-loss Utah. They don't jump over Nebraska, Cincinnati, Memphis. None of those teams should be behind Texas. I just can't stand the AP sometimes. So, like I said, the 2 best conferences in college football are first, the Big Ten, and second, the SEC. The race is still wide open in both conferences for the championship. For example, currently the Big Ten has 2 undefeated teams and 9 1-loss teams. The SEC has 3 undefeated teams and 7 1-loss teams. These are all in conference play, not overall. So I feel like 4 teams from each of those conferences are justifiable for the top 10 because they're the best 2 conferences in the country. And I also think most likely 4 teams from each conference will get into the playoffs or should get into the playoffs because they're the best 2 conferences. The AP has 5 Big Ten teams in the top 25 and 10 SEC teams in the top 25. Why? I don't get it. I don't understand it. We'll talk more about that later. Just a joke. So moving on. Here are my top 10. So coming in at number 10, based off of everything I just said, Georgia, right? They're probably right now the 4th best team in the SEC based off their win over Tennessee. Again, based off their win over Auburn. Both games, by the way, Georgia could have and should have lost, frankly. But they didn't. They won. They're here. Georgia, number 10. Number 9, USC. Again, their 1 loss was very, very close to Illinois, who Illinois has lost to who, by the way? Oh, yeah, Ohio State and Indiana, two of the best teams in the country. And Illinois barely beat USC. USC, one loss, close one to Illinois. They route scum this weekend. I got them at fourth best team right now in the Big Ten, coming in at number 9. Number 8, I have Ole Miss. Again, it's just the fact that they're undefeated right now. They're in the SEC. I don't expect that to last long. I expect them to drop out of the top 10 in the near future. Number 7, Alabama. Alabama's a team on the rise. Their quarterback is playing incredibly well. Do they have holes in their team and places that they are definitely beatable and need to get better? Yeah, for sure. You can pass the ball on Alabama. You can run the ball on Alabama. They don't dominate offensively. They don't have a dominant running game. Their quarterback is playing incredibly well, and Alabama is getting better. So Alabama, number 7. Number 6, Oregon. Why? Because they lost at home, tough game to Indiana, who I believe is the second best team in the country. And Oregon's still the third best team, probably in the Big Ten. Nothing's for sure yet, but probably the third best team in the Big Ten. Therefore, coming in at number 6. Number 5, Texas Tech. Clearly the best team in the Big 12 thus far. I believe a legitimate contender in the playoffs for the long haul. And I think they have a very high quality football team. So Texas Tech, number 5. Number 4, Texas A&M. Again, they just keep rolling. Florida had a couple nice wins in the last couple weeks, and Texas A&M took them down this weekend. And while it wasn't a dominating performance by Texas A&M, they had a 7-point lead through most of the game and then managed to pull away at the end to make it look like a larger disparity. But the fact is they just look like the most consistent team in the SEC right now. And so I'm going to have them at number 4 on my top 10. Number 3, I moved Miami down to number 3. Now, people were arguing with me last week. Oh, Miami deserves to be number 1 because of the teams they have beat. Who? Who did they beat? 4-loss Florida team, a 2-loss Notre Dame team, a 3-loss now Florida State team. Nah, Florida State lost to Pitt. Miami drops after not playing this weekend to number 3. Number 2, I put Indiana. Huge win they had this weekend over Oregon at Oregon. Hard to do. Not many teams can do it. And Indiana did do it this weekend, and they deserve a lot of kudos. And to me, second best team in the country. And number 1, of course, I have Ohio State. Now, people can argue whatever reason they believe who should be number 1 and who should be number 2. You can argue that Indiana has the best win in the country this year by winning at Oregon. And I would say, yeah, I agree with that. I think you're right. That is the best win in the country, Indiana at Oregon. Of all games all season long, that's the best win. But if Indiana plays Ohio State, who are you picking? Who are you picking to win that game? You taking Indiana to win that game, or are you taking Ohio State? I'm still taking Ohio State. While Ohio State has room to grow on offense, they still have better weapons across the board, and they still have the best defense in the country. So Ohio State, in my mind, is the number 1 team in the country.
Hey, quick time out here. Please take a moment to just subscribe, comment, and like. If you do all 3 of those things, you'll really help me out in getting the word out for this show. Help me hopefully gain a larger audience. I would greatly appreciate it. So comment, like, and subscribe, please. And go Bucks.
And now it's time for Legends in Scarlet and Gray. Now, I picked a unique player this week because, quite simply, he was just one of my favorite players, and he had a bit of a tumultuous career at Ohio State. And this week, we're going to talk about Robert Smith. Now, Robert Smith played at Ohio State in 1990 and 1992. And you said, well, what do you mean, and 1992? Well, some of you younger generation players or fans may not realize, but when Robert Smith was at Ohio State, he took a year off from college football in 1991 due to a dispute he was having with coaches over his academic priorities. He initially left the team to focus on pre-med studies. He even considered transferring, but he returned to the team in 1992 after the assistant coach he was involved in the dispute with stepped down. If those of you that don't know, Ohio State's Robert Smith, he wanted to potentially be a doctor someday, and he was torn inside whether football was going to be his career or whether being a doctor was going to be his career or his life. And if you know the rest of the story, he went on to play for the Minnesota Vikings, and he had a good size NFL career, and football obviously won out, and now he's calling play-by-play with color commentary for college football games. And so football is the route he chose. But just some of his stats when he was at Ohio State. First of all, I loved him as a player. He was so smooth when he was running the ball. And in 1990, he played 11 games. He had 164 carries for 1,064 yards. Doesn't sound like a lot of yards, but he averaged 6.5 yards per carry. Okay, so in 1992, when he came back after the year off, I think he was in the ire of the coaching staff. He wasn't showcased like he should have been, and he only had 122 carries for 707 yards and 5.8 yards per carry. He had 7 touchdowns his first year and 8 touchdowns his second year, but he averaged 6.2 yards per carry over his career at Ohio State. And his inability to get along with the coaching staff really hampered what he could have done and could have been at Ohio State. But he did win the Big Ten Freshman of the Year in 1990. He was second team All Big Ten in 92. And he also earned first team All Conference recognition in track in 92 and 93. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler in the NFL in 98 and 2000. He was a second team All-Pro in 2000, and he led the NFC in rushing yards in 2000 with 1,521 yards. So statistically, not one of the greatest historical players in Ohio State history, but for me, in my mind, as someone who watched football in that era, I loved Robert Smith. I loved what he stood for. I loved him as a player. I love that he stood his ground and he was sticking true to who he was and what he was about. And he was athletically a very gifted, talented player, and he didn't get quite the carries and love he deserved because he went through all that. But for me, just know Robert Smith, one of the all-time best players at Ohio State, in my personal opinion. And that's this week's Legend in Scarlet and Gray. All right, now it's time for next week's top 5 games. That's what I call it. But I actually have top 6 games, and then I also will always pick the Ohio State game. So I actually have 7 games to pick. Now, last week, not gonna lie, went into the week a little concerned about some of the picks, not because I don't believe in myself, but because I felt like a lot of those games were toss-up games and they were close wins. But I did go 4-1, and I was 24-10 previous to that. So now I'm 28-11. Put me up against Klatt, put me up against Pate. Yeah, they're using the spread. Okay, fine, whatever. But when you look at like this last week's Klatt's picks, he was picking the other team to win that was favored to lose. Like, for example, he was picking Oklahoma when Texas was the point favorite. He was picking Missouri when Alabama was the point favorite. He was picking scum when USC was the point favorite, and he just had the wrong picks, period. It's not like he was using the spread to pick other ways with logic and reasoning. 28-11, which I think is pretty damn good because I'm picking the toughest games of the week. Now this week, like I said, I have 6 top games of the week and the Ohio State game. And this first one, we're Ohio State fans, we're Big Ten fans, so even though they're not ranked, Washington at Scum. This is a big game. It's a big game. Why? Because first of all, it's at Scum. Second of all, both teams are only one-loss Big Ten teams. Washington to Ohio State and Scum to USC. They got just hammered by USC last week. I mean, frankly, quite embarrassing if you're a Scum fan. Embarrassing. Awful. Now they get to go back home, try to lick their wounds, and they play a Washington team that I feel can move the ball on Scum and can play solid defense. Now, Washington is one of those teams that are like night and day at home versus away. So if this is Scum going to Washington, I pick Washington to win this game easy, hands down. But the fact that they have to go to the big outhouse and play in that crap hole of a stadium, it does benefit Scum. They will have the crowd noise. That always helps any home team. And college football, like no other sport, can I think of, does home field matter more? Take the Indiana at Oregon game. Indiana had a handful, at least, false starts against Oregon. I don't know if it was specifically just the crowd noise. That line shift that Oregon does that I think should be illegal was part of that. But anyway, it just shows home field advantage is huge. And so because Scum is at home, they have a chance to win this game. They do have a chance to make a comeback over the embarrassing show they had at USC. But I'm still going with Washington. Why? Because I don't believe in Scum. I don't believe in their coaching staff. I don't believe in their freshman quarterback. I just don't believe in them at all, period. Is it because I'm a Scum hater? I don't know. Maybe. Is it because I know football and I know what I'm seeing on the field, and what I'm seeing on the field is not a team that anyone should fear? Yeah, that's a big part of it. No one should be afraid of Scum. They're not a good team. They're just not. They're a middle of the road Big Ten team right now. That's just who they are. So moving on, number 5, Ole Miss at number 9, Georgia. Big game in the SEC. Now here's a problem that I have picking this game. I think both teams are frauds. I don't think Georgia's that good. I don't think Ole Miss is that good. I just don't. Either one of these teams, if they make the playoffs, are very likely, depending on who they play against, to get knocked out in the first round. I really genuinely believe that. I don't think either one is great. Georgia is the luckiest team in college football. They definitely have the officials on their side every time I watch them play. I rarely see a bad call go against Georgia. And I don't watch every game, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do. But when I do, it always seems to go Georgia's way. And so because I think Ole Miss is a fraud, because I think Georgia is a fraud, because it's at home, I'm simply going to pick Georgia to win this game. Ole Miss barely beat Washington State at home 24-21. What makes me believe they can go into Georgia and beat Georgia, even though I don't think Georgia's great? So Georgia in that game. Next game, number 11, Tennessee at number 6, Alabama. This is actually a tough one to pick. Why? Because Tennessee is one of the highest scoring teams in the country. They score a lot. The problem is they give up a lot of points. They're a team that has to outscore the other team to win the game. Alabama's quarterback is playing incredibly well right now. The offensive line is getting a little bit better. They still need to get much better if Alabama plans on doing more damage later on down the road. And I like Alabama's defense to just make one more play than Tennessee's defense can make. And so I'm going to take Alabama at home to win this game. Next game, number 20, USC at number 13, Notre Dame. Now, this is going to sound like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, right? I got USC number 9 in the country and the 4th best team in the Big Ten. I say Notre Dame doesn't deserve to be number 13 yet because they have those 2 losses. I believe this is going to be a really, really hard for USC to win. USC's able to move the ball. USC scores a lot of points, but even in losses, Notre Dame scores a lot of points. Their defense has gotten better over the weeks. Their defense only gave up 7 points last week, I believe. North Carolina State, they won 34-7. USC, of course, routed Scum at home, and this is a really, really tough game for me to pick. Everything in my bones says I should pick Notre Dame to win this game. It's at home. They are playing much better, both offensively and defensively, although they haven't really been struggling offensively. It was more defensively they were struggling, and they're getting much better. USC allowed Scum quite a bit, over 300 and some yards in the game, but they kept them out of the end zone. They didn't really allow them to score, and they did a pretty good job shutting down the running game. So just as a believer in the Big Ten, I'm going to hesitatingly pick USC to win this game at Notre Dame. Can Notre Dame win this game? Yes. Will I be surprised if Notre Dame wins this game? No. I'm just picking who I think can make one more play, so I'm going with USC in this one. Next game, number 23 Utah at number 15 BYU. Again, this is the battle for second place in the Big 12. These are the two best other teams, if you will, in the Big 12 right now. BYU is undefeated. They just had a nice win against Arizona over the weekend, and Utah has one loss, and outside of their loss to Texas Tech, they've looked really good against everyone else. To me, again, this is a toss-up game. It's a toss-up game. Either one of these teams can go in and win this game. And frankly, just based off the fact that it's a home game for BYU, it's a rivalry game, it's the fight of the Mormons, the battle of the Mormons, I'm going to take BYU to win this game at home. Again, like I said, toss-up game. Utah can easily go in and win this, and they may do that. I'm picking BYU because they're at home. Number 10, LSU at number 17, Vanderbilt. Now, this is an incredibly interesting game. Why? Because LSU's offense is not great. It's just not a great offense. Vanderbilt's defense is not great. They're just not a great defense. What does LSU have? That's their best part of their team, their defense. What is the best part of Vanderbilt's team? It's their offense. And I really don't know who to pick in this game because it's at Vanderbilt. If it's at LSU, I think I'd take LSU and I walk away. But Vanderbilt has that fire. They believe in themselves as a team. Maybe they have the ability to move the ball against a tough LSU defense and do just enough to get it done and pull out the win. But I, again, am hesitatingly going to pick Vanderbilt to win this game. I can't even believe it, right? I'm picking Vanderbilt over LSU. As a longtime football and college football fan, there's something you don't think you'll do in your lifetime, but here I am doing it. I'm taking Vanderbilt to make just enough plays to get by LSU because honestly, at Alabama, I saw Bama barely beat a Vanderbilt team that Alabama dominated across the board, offensively and defensively, and Vanderbilt still hung in that game. They still kept it close despite those statistics. So I like them to get it done this week. I don't think LSU is a great team. I don't believe they deserve to be number 10. And this is their chance to prove me wrong. So Vanderbilt it is. In the last game, it's a no-brainer, right? It's the Ohio State at Wisconsin. Wisconsin just got absolutely torched by Iowa, 37-0 at Wisconsin. And, will Ohio State go in and win 37-0? No. Will Ohio State beat Wisconsin by 37 points? I also say no. And that really has nothing to do with what Ohio State is capable of, because I believe Ohio State could go in and beat Wisconsin 50-0. It's just not the way Ryan Day calls football games. He just isn't that type of coach. If Ohio State gets a 17, 20-point lead, which they will, he'll go into shutdown mode. He'll go into conservative mode. I just don't see Ohio State just destroying Wisconsin like Iowa just did. But I do expect them to win this pretty easily, running away. Possibly in the fourth quarter, we're looking at the backups playing for Ohio State. So that's how I see that playing out. So my picks for next week, hesitatingly and reluctantly going against my 28-11 record, I have Washington over Scum, Georgia over Ole Miss, Alabama over Tennessee, USC over Notre Dame, BYU over Utah, Vanderbilt over LSU, and the over Wisconsin. And finally, my Instagram topic of the week. If you look at this graph, they show this every week on Instagram, and it's the Big Ten teams that are in the AP Top 25. And as I pointed out earlier, I get the SEC, they have a reputation of their past dominance during the Nick Saban era, but they have not even been in the national championship game in the last 2 years. I forget winning the national championship. They didn't even have a representative to try to win the national championship game. And it was essentially the Pac-12 2 years ago and the ACC last year, even though Notre Dame's an independent. They're essentially the ACC because that's who they play in the regular season. So voters and others just need to recognize the SEC is not who they used to be, and it's time to move on. They have some good to very good teams, but they do not, I repeat, do not have a great team at this time. They don't have a great team. Can Texas A&M or Alabama be a great team towards the end of the season? Yeah, possibly. But right now, that's not what they have. So they have 10 teams in the top 25, and the Big Ten has 5. Why? I mean, if you give me Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, USC, and Illinois, I will take any of them over almost every team in the SEC. Now you put Illinois against A&M at A&M, okay, maybe I take A&M. But every other team in the SEC, you give me the top 5 teams in the Big Ten, I'm taking the top 5, those 5 teams in that game. And my picking record speaks for itself. I'm 28-11. I have a 71% record for picking teams and picking games. And frankly, right now, Washington at 5-1 and Illinois at 5-2, who lost to, in my opinion, the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country in Ohio State and Indiana, both belong in the top 25. Washington should be top 15 at 5-1 in the Big Ten as a Big Ten team. And Illinois should be somewhere in the 20s at 5-2 because they lost to Ohio State and Indiana. I mean, come on. They beat USC, who you now have the 20th ranked team. So there's just no logic to the AP. They're screwing over the Big Ten, and they clearly don't know who the best conference is in the country. And we know who the best conference is in the country, and that's the Big Ten. All right, in closing, I'm going to ask you, the viewers, this. If you watch this show, do you want to see me do a mid-season playoff bracket prediction? If so, let me know in the comments. If nobody comments and doesn't say anything about it, then I'm just not going to take the time to do it next week. But if I get some people saying, yeah, I'd love to see who you got going into the playoffs and in what position, then I'll take the time to put a bracket together, and I'll take the time to tell you who I think is not only going to make the playoffs, but at what rank and who's going to win the national championship. So once again, thanks for listening to the Buckeye Battle Cry show. Make sure you follow me on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening on just an app or somewhere else, because you can find me anywhere else that you listen to podcasts, I am on YouTube at the Buckeye Battle Cry Show. Get over there and follow me. Subscribe, follow me, give me a like, please. I have plenty of people watching these episodes, but I'm not getting too many likes. I don't know, I'm going to start having a personal complex about that. But until then, bleed scarlet and gray and go Bucks.